Welcome to the Mick and Pass Show. I'm Mick.
And I'm Pat.
I'm kind of sick.
Yeah, you got the
The crud.
unknown viruses.
Maybe the vid Rona.
You never know these days.
It's not even worth testing, you know, because you're sick enough that you're just like, I don't want to go out and do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And if it is the corona, it's not like it's not going to kill you.
Mm-hmm.
It really just feels like a summer cold.
Yep.
But I mean, you sounded like, well, I was listening to recording. You sounded like you had it not too long ago.
Mm-hmm.
Billie Jean just got over it the week before last.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started feeling it. I remember last week when we were recording, I was like, driving home, I'm like, I'm sick. I can feel it.
Starting to feel it.
I can feel it like boiling up into my brain.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, excuse me if I sound nasally or snotty, and not at my best. But I'm feeling pretty good now. Pretty much over it, just the congestion.
Over the hump.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, folk. We appreciate you taking time, as always, to check in every week. This week, you know, we both listened to the RFK Jr. dropout and endorsement of Orange Man. And, you know, it's one of those things of like, I'm bummed about it, but he's only dropping out in battleground states. So he's suspending his campaign in states that are swing states because he thinks it's hurting Orange Man too much that, without a doubt, what do we call her? Smiley Lady?
Yeah.
Smiley Lady will win.
The cackler.
Yeah, cackling lady. And so he is suspending his campaign in order to not pull more votes away from Orange Man and endorsed voting for Orange Man in battleground states, but he's still running his campaign in non-battleground states. So that way, if you want to vote for him, you can vote for him without it affecting either party, right? You can vote for him. It's probably not going to really swing California away from Cackly Lady, or, you know, Colorado from Cackly Lady, or Texas from Orange Man, or what's another big red one?
You know, like Wyoming
from from Orange Man. So all that said, the reason we really want to kind of listen to speech and react to it is because he said things. It was funny. I was watching some other person react to it while it was live, and he was like, bro, this is the stuff that got his uncle and dad shot, like talking like this. Like he was saying things about, you know, the government and its failures that was seriously accusatory, just like JFK and RFK Sr. did, right? So I was like, all right, I gotta listen to this then. I listened through the whole thing. I was like, dang, that was nuts. And then I've been telling people about it, and people are like, nah, no way, that's not real. Like, no, seriously, like, we got to look into these things he talked about. And sure enough, I've been looking so much more into, you know, autism diagnosis, obesity rates over time, more and more into like vaccines and like which vaccines are being pushed. I, you know, used to work for an ag company that owns Monsanto and produces it. And I've been looking more and more into like pesticide and its correlation and all that. And so like, there's just so much that he talks about and points blame on that I was like, dude, this guy's like he's making some heavy statements. Like, you got to be able to back it up, and like, you can back it up. Everything he's saying, you can read the, you know, reports and papers that'll come out about it in the studies, and like, you know, fact check him on it. And he's nailing it all in the head. So I also just think like, if anything, this is solidified that I'm going to vote for him. Just because like he's recognized, okay, the worst thing is not me losing. The worst thing is this person winning. And even though I'm not as big of a fan as this guy, as a classical liberal him and I have more in common policy wise than I do with her. You know what I mean? And so he's now just like, all right, like we gotta make some progress here. And I guess like, I remember he got interviewed right before Orange Guy picked his VP. It was a couple weeks before he picked his VP. And they're like, hey, would you like say yes to being Orange Guy's VP? And he was like, no. Like I wouldn't want, and they're like, would you serve on his cabinet? He's like, no. And he like dismissed it. And then I guess right after the assassination, I think put everything in perspective, because the assassination is when really they started, like, that was like within that week, they flipped from sleepy man to smiley lady. And like, it was because they're like, shit, we can't win right now, dude. And it was just one of those things where, I think that put it in perspective for him. And now he's like, it's actually not the worst thing if I was on this dude's cabinet. Because at least he's open to hearing, he's open to me fixing things and like letting me go in and clean house and actually do stuff without being like, get in my way of doing it. Right. And so it's kind of, and also I think honestly RFK is still young enough and healthy enough that, if he was on Orange Man's ticket, they went to the White House, he could easily, change from like being the head of FDA to running for president, 4 years later. Right. And easily swing it up. Once enough people get the confidence of like, oh, he's doing a lot of stuff in there. So I don't know I want to do the reaction to his speech. It's 48 minutes. We'll pause it and like just comment on stuff that we find interesting, and we're gonna run it on like a 2x, not 2x, but 1.5x, just to kind of make sure we push through it and there's time to talk about it. But I think it's important our listeners get to hear what he has to say, because so many people, I think, just what's sad was like I was watching the guy reacting. And so many of the people who were tuning into his stream reacting to it, like all they were like, oh, dude, I can't stand his voice. Oh, dude, how could someone with that voice be our president? I'm like, just listen to what he is saying. Like, just like, what does it matter what he sounds like? Like, it was so superficial. That was like, that was pretty much everyone who wasn't, of course, conservative or independent leaning. That was all of their opinion. Was like, haha, you really want this guy who can't even get his sentence out to be president? Like, I'd rather have Biden again. And it's just like, no, you're just going to vote for whoever they tell you to vote for.
Like one's a physical disability, the other one's a mental disability, like.
Well, and like I legit was, well, actually, it's a mental disability.
Well, it's neurological. But it's not physical, his. It doesn't have to do with his,
brain debilitating.
Right.
But what I realized after listening to that speech was like, I actually have a hard time listening to Orange Man talk now.
Oh yeah.
Because I'm just like, I feel like RFK spoiled us with like a very presidential speaker. You know what I mean? It's so like the cadence of anyone else talking is kind of hard for me to listen to on either side of it. So I'm like, oh my gosh, neither of them can like communicate it very clearly and concisely. Yeah. So, have you seen this yet? Have you watched it yet, Pat?
I haven't seen it all the way through, but I've seen a lot of clips from it. Seen like the big key points, takeaways from it, and I think that I've been on. Yeah, for RFK has been interesting to me this whole time, because he's just, to your point, what you're getting at is he seems like someone who can put together coherent sentences, but also from the heart. Like he's not just babbling out talking points of what he's supposed to say. He's actually addressing issues and things. So yeah, and I think that from what I have heard from him, I think that he's carries himself as a much stronger presence or like potential leader in the way that he talks. He's not just, for whatever reason, like almost every big time politician they don't say anything.
No, it's just lip service.
Yeah.
I think Vance and Waltz, I think both of them are very noisy about the things they stand for. And they actually are both pretty decent speakers.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that like on that ticket, they're better at speaking than, the actual like president runners, like what is it? Candidates, yeah. So anyways, but here we'll go. We'll hop right into it. And I can skip through need be, but there's just a lot that he says that I think's, again, important for people to hear. Just because this guy could have been our president, man. He could be our president still next time. There is a chance, he explains it in the speech, there's a chance that in a runoff of 269 and 269 for both Orange Man and Smiley Lady, that he could be an incumbent president.
Right.
With like the remaining votes, right? Well, not the remaining votes, but with like, then it goes into them voting. Like everyone just gets to vote for who they think's most fit. And it doesn't have to be in accordance to
the electoral college.
College. So I just thought that was interesting. But here we go. Smoke break. Hey, Ken, it's Mick, and I've got something important to talk about. We all hope we never find ourselves in a self-defense situation, but life's unpredictable. Enter the National Self-Protection Plan from Attorneys on Retainer, an actual credible law firm you can put on retainer for your self-defense needs. For just $35 a month, you get national coverage in all 50 states for criminal and civil legal representation in self-defense situations, complete with a 24/7, 365 toll-free emergency line. That's real legal support when you need it most. What's in the package? Bail bonds, scene cleanup, firearm replacement, even mental health counseling. Plus, 0 fees for a laundry list of defense-related costs like expert witnesses. So support the show and get yourself some peace of mind. Click the link in our show notes or visit our sponsors page to sign up for the National Self-Protection Plan from Attorneys on Retainer.
Hey folks, Pat here. If you're like Mick and I, you're a fan of classic tales like Lonesome Dove, Blood Meridian, The Three-Body Problem, and Steinbeck's East of Eden. With Audible, you can dive into these epic stories anytime, anywhere. Sign up for a free month, and your first audiobook is on the house. To start your free trial and support our show, click the link in the show notes or swing by the sponsors page on our website.
Want an awesome website for your podcast? Check out Podpage. We use it for the Mick and Pat show, and it's a game changer. Set it up in minutes, no coding needed. Support the show by using our link to get started. Your podcast deserves a home as great as ours. Podpage, the one-stop solution.
"16 months ago, in April of 2023, I launched my campaign for President of the United States. I began this journey as a Democrat, the party of my father, my uncle, the party which I pledged my own allegiance to long before I was old enough to vote. I attended my first Democratic convention at the age of 6 in 1960. And back then, the Democrats were the champions of the Constitution, of civil rights. The Democrats stood against authoritarianism, against censorship, against colonialism, imperialism, and unjust wars. We were the party of labor, of the working class. The Democrats were the party of government transparency and the champion of the environment. Our party was the bulwark against big money interests and corporate power. True to its name, it was the party of democracy. As you know, I left that party in October because it had departed so dramatically from the core values that I grew up with. It had become the party of war, censorship, corruption, big pharma, big tech, big ag, and big money. When it abandoned democracy by canceling the primary to conceal the cognitive decline of the sitting president, I left the party to run as an independent. The mainstream of American politics and journalism derided my decision. Conventional wisdom said that it would be impossible even to get on the ballot as an independent because each state poses an insurmountable tangle of arbitrary rules for collecting signatures. I would need over 1 million signatures, something no presidential candidate in history had ever achieved. And then I'd need a team of attorneys and millions of dollars to handle all the legal challenges from the DNC. The naysayers told us that we were climbing a glass.
First thing right there, my reaction when I was hearing that is like, this is just also absolute bullshit. Like the fact that like this is the hoops that all of these candidates have to jump through to be able to even remotely like stand a chance to get on the ballot, let alone get into like debates. Like, bro, there's no way any of these other electorates on the Republican or Democratic tickets
could have achieved those
gotten
things.
remotely close to those things.
Right.
Like Jeb Bush, There's no way he would have ever gotten 1 million signatures, but yet he was still allowed to participate in party debates.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was just like the fact that like really ask yourself, if you listen to this, I really challenge people to ask themselves, is there anywhere in, you know, our state of mind of a free, you know, independent, self-governing nation that this guy shouldn't be allowed to debate either side? Like, it makes no sense to me that here we are in August and that for the last year and a half, he's been he hasn't been allowed in any debates. That is ludicrous. Like, that is absolutely asinine in my opinion.
Definitely. And there has to be ways that you can't just let everybody off the street come into the thing, right?
Yeah.
But the like you said, the amounts of signatures, everything you need to jump through the hoops to even get involved is, you know, pretty astronomical, which would like almost put you at, if any of those other candidates could do that, that would almost say for a fact that they were going to win, you know?
And like the fact that, like, I know Orange Man said like he was like, I'd be totally up to like debating him, but due to laws, regulatory laws, it was said like, oh no, it's actually illegal for you as a presidential candidate to debate with someone who's not another presidential candidate. And I was like, this is insane. Like, anyone can debate him when it's an interview,
right?
But like the fact that they'd be on stage and taking questions, it's somehow illegal at a federal level. And I was trying to understand the laws wrapped around it, and I'm just like, what purpose does any of this serve other than to like make it harder for the American people to hear other opinions on how the country should be run? You know what I mean? Anyways, but that was like the first thing that I was just like, I can't believe I'm seeing this guy drop out of the race, and I never got to like see him once debate someone live.
Yeah, and he comes out swinging, you know, comparing him to just like the party of war, you know.
Yeah, well,
like,
and like that's the truth.
Yeah,
it's like the conservative party, like the GOP didn't block him anywhere. The GOP didn't run him out of any states. It was in all of the DNC states, like all the primarily blue states that were running him out. You know what I mean? And making it impossible, throwing legal loopholes at him constantly to keep him gummed up and from being able to be on any ballots to vote for.
Oh yeah.
Fast version of Mount Impossible. So the first thing I want to tell you is that we proved them wrong. We did it because beneath the radar of mainstream media organs, we inspired a massive independent political movement. More than 100,000 volunteers sprang into action, hopeful that they could reverse our nation's decline. Many worked 10-hour days, sometimes in blizzards and blazing heat. They sacrificed family time, personal commitments, and sleep month after month, energized by a shared vision of a nation healed of its divisions. They set up tables at churches and farmers markets. They canvassed door to door. In Utah and in New Hampshire, volunteers collected signatures in snowstorms, convincing each supporter to stop in the frigid cold, to take off their gloves, and to sign legibly. During a heat wave in Nevada, I met a tall, athletic volunteer who cheerfully told me that he had lost 25 pounds collecting signatures in 117-degree heat. To finance this effort, young Americans donated their lunch money, and senior citizens gave up part of their Social Security checks. Our 50-state organization collected those millions of signatures and more. No presidential campaign in American political history has ever done that.
That's crazy.
And so I want to thank all of those dedicated volunteers and congratulate the campaign staff who coordinated this enormous logistical feat. Your accomplishments were regarded as impossible. You carried me up that glass mountain. You pulled off a miracle. You achieved what all the pundits said could never be done. You have my deepest gratitude, and I'm never going to forget that, not just for what you did for my campaign, but for the sacrifices you made because you love our country. You showed everyone that democracy is still possible here. It continues to survive in the press and in the idealistic human energies that still thrive beneath a canvas of neglect and of official and institutional corruption. Today, I'm here to tell you that I will not allow your efforts to go to waste. I'm here to tell you that I will leverage your tremendous accomplishments to serve the ideals that we share, the ideals of peace, of prosperity, of freedom, of health, all the ideals that motivated my campaign. I'm here today to describe the path forward that you've opened with your commitment and with your hard labors. Now, in an honest system, I believe that I would have won the election. In a system that my father and my uncles thrived in, a system with open debates with fair primaries, with regularly scheduled debates with fair primaries, and with a truly independent media untainted by government propaganda and censorship, in a system of nonpartisan courts and election boards, everything would be different.
It's one thing when, like, you know, you have the conservative party being like, the media is unfair and paints us in, like, is like manipulating things. And then, like, you know, Democrat party never says it. But, like, they might be like, well, Fox is always, like, totally unfair and biased, right?
Right.
He goes on here, but, like, it's just like, it's one thing to be like, you both point at each other, accusing each other for the same thing you're doing. But then when the dude who's independent picks a side, and he's like, no, you guys are the, like, real ones corrupting that. Like, it's also just like, okay, all right. So, like, maybe kind of, like, maybe there's no denying it now. You know what I mean?
Right. Just admit it.
Yep.
After all, the polls consistently showed me beating each of the other candidates, both in favorability and also in head-to-head matchups. But I'm sorry to say that while democracy may still be alive at the grassroots, it has become little more than a slogan for our political institutions, for our media, and for our government, and most sadly at all for me, for the Democratic Party. In the name of saving democracy, the Democratic Party set itself to dismantling it, lacking confidence in its candidate, that its candidate could win in a fair election at the voting booth. The DNC waged continual legal warfare against both President Trump and myself. Each time that our volunteers turned in those towering boxes of signatures needed to get on the ballot, the DNC dragged us into court, state after state, attempting to erase their work and to subvert the will of the voters who had signed those petitions. It deployed DNC-aligned judges to throw me and other candidates off the ballot and to throw President Trump in jail. It ran a sham primary that was rigged to prevent any serious challenge to President Biden. Then, when a predictably bungled debate performance precipitated the palace coup against President Biden, the same shadowy DNC operatives appointed his successor, also without an election. They installed a candidate.
What?
He's just
your eyebrows jumped at that one.
Well, I mean, because he's throwing it out there, like, just like, I mean, and calling it for what it is and what it was, and nobody will accept it. You know, like
coup d'etat.
Yeah, Biden didn't pull himself out of the race necessarily, and like, at least willingly, and and then just shadowy operatives. I mean,
DNC appointed judges is what he's saying. You know.
Yeah, and like. And is DNC, that's Democratic National Convention, judges.
Yeah.
Why is that a title? Like,
yeah,
it feels like it's a conflict of
interest
on being,
you should be an American judge, federal judge, a state judge.
Is that a position I don't understand?
No, I think it's literally like the DNC appointing judges over the cases of whether or not he's allowed to be on a ballot in a state.
Yep. Sounds a little mobstery to me.
Well, and it's one of those things too, like at this point, a lot of people are like, how much money did Trump pay him? Like, oh man, like he's really sucking the Trump off. And it's just like, do you really think a guy who's made a career taking $1 trillion companies to court over poisoning the environment, do you really think that guy can be paid off?
Right.
Do you think Trump has enough money to pay him off? No, not anywhere. And also, what is it? Does Trump have any money or not?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, but because like, here's my thing is like, this guy has taken company after company to court and the government to court and sued the hell out of them for poisoning rivers, poisoning soil, poisoning people. You can look up any of his kind of like big court cases. The one against Monsanto and Roundup is like the biggest one, of course, in recent years. But if you don't think for a moment those companies didn't try to grease his wheels with a big ass paycheck, then like, I don't know what fantasy you're living in. And if you think that he said no to that and was like, no, I'll see you in court. And yeah, it's going to be hell and it's going to be miserable and it's going to be a knockout, drag out fight. But like, we're going to do it because we're going to win. And eventually we'll dry you out and you're going to owe damages for what you've done. Right. Do you think like Trump could come and be like, hey, flip on that DNC, like, you know, say all these bad things about the Democratic Party and, you know, Kamala Harris is a candidate and then join me on my side for $1 billion.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
showing
Like,
the
no,
dark side.
like not, he doesn't have more money than those companies. Like, and so like, I think really what we're seeing is just like a dude who went into the race initially to like, hey, I'm going to do my best to run independent here since the Democratic Party ticket won't let me run. And then it was like, and he wasn't a fan of either. And then now he's at the end and he's like, you know what? They've burned me so hard with the butt of cigarettes. You know what I mean? Like that I'm burnt against them. Like, and I'm flipping on my own volition here. Like, you know, and like he still, cause he would still describe himself as a classical liberal.
Right.
Are you pulling up the video to watch as well or?
No.
Okay.
No,
I just didn't know if you wanted me to tell you the time we're at.
No, it's
who
fine.
was so unpopular with voters that she dropped out in 2020 without winning a single delegate. My uncle and my father both relished debate. They prided themselves on their capacity to go toe-to-toe with any opponent in the battle over ideas. They would be astonished to learn of a Democratic Party presidential nominee who, like Vice President Harris, has not appeared in a single interview or an unscripted encounter with voters for 35 days. This is profoundly undemocratic. How are people to choose when they don't know whom they are choosing? And how can this look to the rest of the world? My father and my uncle were always conscious of America's image abroad because of our nation's role as the template for democracy, the role model for democratic processes, and the leader of the free world. Instead of showing us her substance and character, the DNC and its media organs engineered a surge of popularity for Vice President Harris based upon, well, nothing. No policies, no interviews, no debates, only smoke and mirrors and balloons in a highly reduced Chicago circus. There in Chicago, a string of Democratic speakers mentioned Donald Trump 147 times just on the first day. Oh, who needs a policy when you have Trump to hate? In contrast, at the RNC convention, President Biden was mentioned only twice in 4 days. I do interviews every day. Many of you have interviewed me. Anybody who asks gets to interview me. Some days I do as many as 10. President Trump, who actually was nominated and won an election, also does interviews daily. How did the Democratic Party choose a candidate that has never done an interview or debate during the entire election cycle? We know the answers. They did it by weaponizing the government agencies. They did it by abandoning democracy.
Gosh,
they did it by suing the
it
opposition.
is just crazy.
And by disenfranchising American voters. What most alarms me isn't how the Democratic Party conducts its internal affairs or runs its candidates. What alarms me is the...
Will you look up when the last time that's happened? When someone for the Democratic Party was made presidential nominee without there being a vote?
I think never.
That's what I'm thinking too. Like I don't think like I don't think anyone is really caring. You know what I mean? Like everyone's like, oh yeah, I guess that just happened. And it's like, I think it's never happened before. And they're just like, and no one realizes like an insane abuse of power just occurred in our nation.
Yeah.
resort to censorship and media control and the weaponization of the federal agencies. When a U.S. president colludes with or outright coerces media companies to censor political speech, it's an attack on our most sacred right of free expression, and that's the very right upon which all of our other constitutional rights rest. President Biden mocked Vladimir Putin's 88% landslide in the Russian elections, observing that Putin and his party controlled the Russian press and that Putin prevented serious opponents from appearing on the ballot. But here in America, the DNC also prevented opponents from appearing on the ballot. And our television networks exposed themselves as Democratic Party organs over the course of more than a year in a campaign where my poll numbers reached at times in the high 20s. The DNC-aligned mainstream media networks maintain a near perfect embargo on interviews with me. During his 10-month presidential campaign in 1992, Ross Perot gave 34 interviews on mainstream networks. In contrast, during the 16 months since I declared, ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, and CNN combined gave only 2 live interviews from me. Those networks instead ran a continuous deluge of hit pieces with inaccurate, often vile, pejoratives and defamatory smears. Some of those same networks and colluded with the DNC to keep me off the debate stage. Representatives of those networks are in this room right now, and I'll just take a moment to ask you to consider the many ways that your institutions have abdicated this really sacred responsibility, duty of a free press to safeguard democracy and to challenge always the party in power. Instead of maintaining that posture of fierce skepticism toward authority, your institutions have made themselves government mouthpieces and stenographers for the organs of power. You didn't alone cause the devolution of American democracy, but you could have prevented it. The Democratic Party's censorship of social media was even more of a naked exercise of executive power. This week, a federal judge, Terry Doty, upheld my injunction against President Biden, calling the White House's censorship project, quote, the most egregious violation of the First Amendment in the history of the United States of America. Doty's previous 155-page decision details how, just 37 hours after he took the oath of office, swearing to uphold the Constitution, President Biden and his White House opened up a portal and then invited the CIA, the FBI, CISA, which is a censorship agency, it's the center of the censorship industrial complex, DHS, the IRS, and other agencies to censor me and other political dissidents on social media. Even today, users who try to post my campaign videos to Facebook or YouTube get messages that this content violates community standards. 2 days after Judge Doty rendered his decision this week, Facebook was still attaching warning labels to an online petition calling on ABC to include me in the upcoming debate. They said that violates community standards, their community standards. The mainstream media was once the guardian of the First Amendment and democratic principles, and it's joined this systemic attack on democracy. It also, the media justifies their censorship on the grounds of combating misinformation, but governments and oppressors don't censor lies. They don't fear lies. They fear the truth, and that's what they censor. And I don't want any of this to sound like a personal complaint, because it's not. For me, it's all part of a journey, and it's a journey that I signed up with. But I need to make these observations because I think they're critical for us doing the thing that we need to do as citizens in a democracy to assess where we are in this country and what our democracy still looks like, and the assumptions about U.S. leadership around the globe. And are we really really still a role model for democracy in this country? Or have we made it, a kind of a joke? And here's the good news. While mainstream outlets denied me a critical platform, they didn't shut down my ideas, which have especially flourished among young voters and independent voters, thanks to the alternative media. Many months ago, I promised the American people that I would withdraw from the race if I became a spoiler. A spoiler is someone who will alter the outcome of the election but has no chance of winning. In my heart, I no longer believe that I have a realistic path to electoral victory in the face of this relentless, systematic censorship and media control. So I cannot in good conscience ask my staff and volunteers to keep working their long hours or ask my donors to keep giving when I cannot honestly tell them that I have a real path to the White House. Furthermore, our polling consistently showed that by staying on the ballot in the battleground states, I would likely hand the election over to the Democrats with whom I disagree on the most existential issues: censorship, war, and chronic disease.
Again, dude, that's crazy. That this guy is like a classic liberal, and he has more in common with modern day conservatives than he does the Democratic Party.
Well, and I think that's because that party has changed so much. And what I do like about his thing is like him and Trump disagree about probably just about like most policies, right? Or like not, or
maybe.
But I'd say,
I mean, he'll talk about it here soon.
He'll talk about things he does agree with, but his thing is he's not in the weeds on this policy, that policy. He's up higher going, no, the whole system is not like, he's like, this,
it's not functioning.
Yeah, he's like,
it's not working.
I don't want to be a part of this system. I don't want to be a part of that. And like, and what it has become is just become so corrupt. He's like, he's like, it makes more sense to side with the side of democracy in his view. This is the side that's actually going to like maintain and uphold the baseline values. Like the fact where if you see, that's just most basic thing being, you go on a college campus, let one guy start a debate, another guy start a debate. One guy's going to be really respectful while people yell and scream at him, like, yeah. And it's like, well, RFK is like, well, I don't like what the guy, or I don't agree with what the calm guy's saying, but he's not disparaging you and screaming and losing his mind. He's having a logical conversation with you. And I'd rather be with that guy.
Sure.
Even though maybe I agree a little bit with like these policies and that policies. He's like, no, I want to be a part of the group that can think and talk and work stuff out and like not censor, not be warmongers.
It's ironic that you use that example in Trump. Maybe not the loudest, but he definitely has the best disses.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? But no, I agree. Like because what it boils down to is like he's a classic liberal in that, like, a lot of people today I don't think remember because they were too young. Like a lot of millennials, Gen Zs. Unfortunately, I don't think Gen Zers know classic liberals like that we knew in our parents or our friends' parents. But like I remember my mom growing up, and like all of my mom's friends and all of her partners, they were all like anti be at war forever.
Mm-hmm.
They were anti big corporation, and they were anti like big corporation foods and like highly processed stuff,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And they were also like not necessarily anti welfare, but they were anti like permanently on welfare.
Right.
And it was it was all about like very much like enabling the individual to be a part of a like bettering society.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy to see now, like every liberal or Democrat I talk to is like super pro US being in everything and at war all the time,
Mm-hmm.
defending every big major company and anything they do,
Mm-hmm.
as long as they have like, you know, a rainbow trans flag on June.
Mm-hmm. Or a plan for, or green, you know, if they're green.
If they're in the
company,
ESG
right?
company. And they're always super pro, like, I mean, they're never like going to speak out against like big pharma. You know what I mean? They're like, oh yeah, baby, you gotta take it.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta get the latest thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just insane to me. Like that's where that party went. And like, here's someone who's just talking about, and like every person I remember being on the Democratic Party as a kid, every Democrat I knew, everyone who, I'll say this, I don't even know if they were Democrats, but I'll say everyone who didn't agree with Bush, because that's the first president I remember like consciously.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone who didn't agree with Bush was like RFK Jr. here.
Right.
You know what I mean? And now it's like those people are now lumped in with the far right.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like they're not Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
It's just crazy to me. But yeah, the I'm just gonna rewind it 5 seconds. But like the warmongering, the like not being like the big pro corporation pharma, pro big farming,
Mm-hmm.
Big manufacturing. Like it's crazy that that's what that party is now.
Disagree on the most existential issues: censorship, war, and
Censorship.
chronic disease. Oh, I want everyone to know that I am not terminating my campaign. I am simply suspending it and not ending it. My name, my name will remain on the ballot in most states. If you live in a blue state, you can vote for me without harming or helping President Trump or Vice President Harris. In red states, the same will apply. I encourage you to vote for me. And if enough of you do vote for me, and neither of the major party candidates win 270 votes, which is quite possible. In fact, today our polling shows them tying at 269 to 269. And I could conceivably still end up in the White House in a contingent election. But in about 10 battleground states where my presence would be a spoiler, I'm going to remove my name. And I've already started that process and urge voters not to vote for me. It's with a sense of victory and not defeat that I'm suspending my campaign activities. Not only did we do the impossible by collecting 1 million signatures, we changed the national political conversation forever. Chronic disease, free speech, government corruption, breaking our addiction to war have moved to the center of politics. I can say to all who have worked so hard the last year and a half, thank you for a job well done. 3 great causes drove me to enter this race in the first place, primarily. And these are the principal causes that persuaded me to leave the Democratic Party and run as an independent. And now to throw my support to President Trump. The causes were free speech, a war in Ukraine, and the war on our children. I've already described some of my personal experiences and struggles with the government's censorship industrial complex. I want to say a word about the Ukraine war. The military industrial complex has provided us with a familiar comic book justification, like they do on every war, that this one is a noble effort to stop a supervillain, Vladimir Putin, from invading the Ukraine and then to thwart his Hitler-like march across Europe. In fact, tiny Ukraine is a proxy in a geopolitical struggle initiated by the ambitions of the U.S. neocons or American global hegemony. I'm not excusing Putin for invading Ukraine. He had other options. The war is Russia's predictable response to the reckless neocon project of extending NATO to encircle Russia, a hostile act. The credulous media rarely explain to Americans that we unilaterally walked away from 2 intermediate nuclear weapons treaties with Russia and then put nuclear-ready Aegis missile systems in Romania and Poland. This is a hostile act.
That's crazy, bro. That's crazy that's like the first time I'm hearing this.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like when I watched the speech and I was like, wait, what? America declined 2 nuclear agreements with Russia. America declined 2 peace agreements between Russia and Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Wait a second. I wasn't aware of that. And like just going through that, and then this, like he just named Algeria and what was the other one?
Nuclear-ready Aegis missile systems in Romania and Poland.
Romania and Poland. And I was like, did we really put those there? I mean, that's closer than Cuba is to the U.S. And I looked it up and I was like, holy shit, like everything is saying right. Like we were taking insanely aggressive actions as a NATO.
Yeah, like what would we do if someone put something in Alberta? You know, if the Russians,
if Russians are trying to put nukes in Alberta, and like NATO was like, don't you do anything, we'd be like, all right, we're annexing Canada in like 60 days. And again, I agree with what he's saying here too, though. Like Putin had other options. He didn't need to invade. But what do you think Russia's going to do when you put nukes on its doorstep?
Well, what do you... And to the peace agreements part would be the how do you clean billions of dollars?
Yeah, no kidding.
If you don't
right?
have a war to push it through.
Well, and like he's going to say something here too that's pretty insane. But that the whole point of this is that NATO and the U.S. neocons are essentially just trying to drain Russia of its war assets, so that way it can't go to war elsewhere.
We'll still have its nukes.
Yeah, it's true. Which is like the scary thing is like, what do you think Russia's going to do if all of its young men die in a proxy war?
You back them all the way
and you
against
continue pushing them against the wall. Do you think like they're going to be like, well, we don't have any young men left to send. I guess we'll start sending bombs.
Is a hostile act. And that the Biden White House repeatedly spurned Russia's offer to settle this war peacefully. The Ukraine war began in 2014 when U.S. agencies overthrew the democratically elected government of Ukraine and installed a hand-picked pro-Western government that launched a deadly civil war against ethnic Russians in Ukraine. In 2019, America walked away from a peace treaty, the Minsk Agreement, that had been negotiated between Russia and Ukraine by European nations. And then in April of 2022, we wanted the war. In April of 2022, President Biden sent Boris Johnson to Ukraine to force President Zelensky to tear up a peace agreement that he and the Russians had already signed, and the Russians were withdrawing troops from Kiev and Donbass and Lugansk. And that peace agreement would have brought peace to the region and would have allowed Donbass and Lugansk to remain part of Ukraine. President Biden stated that month that his objective in the war was regime.
Absolutely insane if you look that up. Straight up, Boris Johnson did go there, and he straight up ripped up the peace treaty after it was signed. Which also just makes you think, like, how big is Biden's dick to make the prime minister of UK be like, hey man, I'm busy this weekend. Can you go to Russia and rip up that document before they like goes into effect? Thanks. That's insane. That's some serious strings to be pulling on a prime minister.
Change in Russia. His Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin simultaneously explained that America's purpose in the war was to exhaust the Russian army, to degrade its capacity to fight anywhere else in the world. These objectives, of course, have nothing to do with what they were telling Americans about protecting Ukraine's sovereignty. Ukraine is a victim in this war, and it's a victim of the West. Since then, of Russia and both Russia and the West. Since then, we have, since tearing up that agreement, forcing Zelensky to tear up the agreement, we've squandered the flower of Ukrainian youth, as many as 600,000 Ukrainian kids, and over 100,000 Russian kids, all of whom we should be mourning, have died, and the Ukraine's infrastructure is destroyed. The war has been a disaster for our country as well. We squandered nearly $200 billion already, and these are badly needed dollars in our communities, suffering communities all over our country. The Nord Stream pipeline sabotage and the sanctions have destroyed Europe's industrial base, which formed the bulwark of U.S. national security. A strong Germany with a strong industry is a much, much stronger deterrent to Russia, and a Germany that is deindustrialized and turned into just an extension of a U.S. military base. We've pushed Russia into a disastrous alliance with China and Iran. We're closer to the brink of nuclear exchange than at any time since 1962. And the neocons in the White House don't seem to care at all. Our moral authority and our economy are in shambles, and the war gave rise to the emergence of BRICS, which now threatens to replace the dollar as the global reserve currency. This is a first-class calamity for our country. Judging by her bellicose, belligerent speech last night in Chicago, we can assume that President Harris will be an enthusiastic advocate for this and other neocon military adventures. And President Trump says that he will reopen negotiations with President Putin and end the war overnight as soon as he becomes president. This alone would justify my support for his campaign. Last summer, it looked like no candidate was willing to negotiate a quick end to the Ukraine war, to tackle chronic disease epidemic, to protect free speech, our constitutional freedoms, to clean corporate influence out of our government, or to defy the neocons and their agenda of endless military adventurism. But now one of the two candidates has adopted these issues as his own, to the point where he has asked to enlist me in his administration. I'm speaking, of course, of Donald Trump. Less than 2 hours after President Trump narrowly escaped assassination, Callie Means called me on my cell phone. I was then in Las Vegas. Callie is arguably the leading advocate for food safety, for soil regeneration, and for ending the chronic disease epidemic that is destroying America's health and ruining our economy. Callie has exposed the insidious corruption at the FDA, the NIH, the HHS, and the USDA that has caused the epidemic. Callie had been working on and off for my campaign, advising me on those subjects since the beginning. And those subjects have been my primary focus for the last 20 years. I was delighted when Callie told me that day that he had also been advising President Trump. He told me President Trump was anxious to talk to me about chronic disease and other subjects, and to explore avenues of cooperation. He asked if I would take a call from the president. President Trump telephoned me a few minutes later, and I met with him the following day. A few weeks later, I met again with President Trump and his family members and closest advisors in Florida. In a series of long, intense discussions, I was surprised to discover that we are aligned on many key issues. In those meetings, he suggested that we join forces as a unity party. We talked about Abraham Lincoln's team of rivals. That arrangement would allow us to disagree publicly and privately, and fiercely if need be, on issues over which we differ, while working together on the existential issues upon which we are in concordance. I was a ferocious critic of many of the policies during his first administration, and there are still issues and approaches upon which we continue to have very serious differences.
To your point, like what you were saying earlier.
On other key issues, like ending the forever wars, ending the childhood disease epidemics, securing the border, protecting freedom of speech, unraveling the corporate capture of our regulatory agencies, getting the U.S. intelligence agencies out of the business of propagandizing and censoring and surveilling Americans, and interfering with our elections. Following my first discussion with President Trump, I tried unsuccessfully to open similar discussions with Vice President Harris. Vice President Harris declined to meet or even to speak with me. Suspending my candidacy is a heart-rending decision for me, but I'm convinced that it's the best hope for ending the Ukraine war and ending the chronic disease epidemic that is eroding our nation's vitality from the inside, and for finally protecting free speech. I feel a moral obligation to use this opportunity to save millions of American children, above all things. In case some of you don't realize how dire the condition is of our children's health and chronic disease in general, I would urge you to view Dr. Carlson's recent interview with Callie Means and his sister, Dr. Casey Means, who is the top graduate of her class at Stanford Medical School. This is an issue that affects all of us far more directly and urgently than any culture war issue and all the other issues that we obsess on and that are tearing apart our country. This is the most important issue. Therefore, it has the potential to bring us together. So let me share a little bit about why I believe it's so urgent. Today, 2/3, we spend more on healthcare than any country on earth, twice what they pay in Europe. And yet we have the worst health outcomes of any nation in the world. We're about 79th in health outcomes behind Costa Rica, and Nicaragua, and Mongolia, and other countries. Jeez. Nobody has a chronic.
It's insane that Nicaragua has better health outcomes than we do.
Mm. Yeah,
that's and you could also like feign it as like, well, they're not honest about their reporting. They're a third world country. Mm-hmm. They don't have accurate reporting. They're fudging their figures. It's like, even if they do, you can't deny how unhealthy our outcome is.
Right. And if you're doing it in comparison to technologies at hand.
Yep.
Right. Like we have the craziest technologies.
Oh yeah.
To then still be ranking that low.
It's insane.
Chronic disease burden like we have. And during the COVID epidemic, we had the highest body count of any country in the world. We had 16% of the COVID deaths, and we only have 4.2% of the world's population. And CDC says that's because we are the sickest people on earth. We have the highest chronic disease rate on earth. And the average American who died from COVID had 3.8 chronic diseases. So these were people who had immune system collapse, who had mitochondrial dysfunction. And no other country has anything like this.
Mitochondrial dysfunction. Powerhouse ain't working, bro.
Yeah, dude, at the most tiniest level of your body.
Yeah.
Thirds of American adults and children suffer from chronic health issues. 50 years ago, that number was less than 1%. So we've gone from 1% to to 66%. In America, 74%
Listen to that one more time.
of the country has anything like this. 2/3 of American adults and children suffer from chronic health issues. 50 years ago,
2/3.
that number was less than 1%. So we've gone from 1% to 66%. In America, 74% of Americans are now overweight or obese.
What?
That's a lot.
74? This is like how I was telling Billie Jean about this.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, and she was like, well, we do live in Colorado, which is like, you know, probably the healthiest nation, healthiest state in the nation, if not close to it. And I'm just like, I don't think I could gather 100 random people in our towns and 75 would be obese. I don't even think it'd be close to that. I think still, this is an awful number, but I think it'd still be like 50, maybe 40. And I don't know, man, it just is mind boggling to me. And like that concept of like, we're at 3/4 now. That means there's more. Think about this. I remember growing up on the playground. There was
the fat kid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he was your homie. He was great. Nothing against him. But he was just a fat kid. And he's a staple of the group. He's a staple of your friend group. You love him for who he is. And, you know, who knows why a kid might be fat at such a young age, right? Might not even be really credit against them. Like, it's probably got a lot to do with, like, the parents and stuff. But nowadays, it means that every kid on the playground is the fat kid. And now there's the skinny kid. It's like, oh, yeah, well, he was our skinny friend. That's insane that it flipped in our lifetime. That's unreal to me.
It's like you've seen those videos of like from the 40s of like gym class.
Yeah.
And all the boys are like monkey barn, pull-ups, push-ups, like, and it's like those don't look anything like us. Yeah,
those boys though look like they were getting trained to go to war. Like it looked like PE was just boot camp before being like drafted.
Yep.
But no, dude, I did see that and I was like, damn, bro, that's awesome. And I think my PE classes were really good about physical exercise. Like they were really intentional. They were like definitely physical exercise courses. And because I remember most of the time in PE in middle school, it was sweat. Like, I mean, it was a good workout, intense. And then going into high school, you had your dedicated, required, you had to have so many PE credits to graduate, right?
And you know, the fact that nutrition's the bigger part of this conversation, but it is, but that schools are like doing away with like PE really.
That's unreal to me though, that there's like, it's not a requirement to graduate high school to have like so many PE credits anymore. I remember, dude, I was like in my senior year, I was like, damn, I've taken a PE class every semester and I'm behind. Yeah. It's second semester of senior year. All I took was PE and art classes. Yeah. It was awesome. I did golf and badminton, weights, swimming. It was great. Then I did underwater basket weaving, watercolors. It was awesome, dude. It was like the most easiest like second semester I've ever had to do. Oh yeah. But it was one of those things that like nowadays I've talked to kids and they're like, yeah, no, you don't need to do that to graduate. No, like I haven't had a PE class since middle school. Like that's crazy.
Oh yeah.
Anyways, but that number 2, I do think like he mentions it and talks to it, but just right out of the gate, like, yes, over 2/3 of Americans today have, like more than 3 chronic diseases or diagnosed with more than 3 chronic diseases. Whereas 50 years ago, it was under 1%. Sure. Probably screening and testing is, you know, really helped increase diagnosis and stuff like that. Also, we have new diseases that didn't necessarily exist. Like, well, they existed, but they weren't recognized then, right? Like, I don't think 50 years ago, ADHD was recognized.
Right.
I think there was a recognized that children could have an attention disorder. But I think they were just, you know, thought to be touched. Right. Right. And so like, there's stuff like that. And then like, you know, think of all like your various, you know, like skin psoriasis related diseases like eczema and things like that could exist. And like you could have it on your scalp and it's like technically all different dermatological diseases, right? Right. So, but I mean, I'm sure also like as he talks about it, I do think like, especially if you look into it, you cannot rule all of that into just like, oh, well, it's always been there. We just have more names and we've diagnosed it and split it up more. It's like, that's not even close to that kind of factorization and that rate of increase across the population.
Oh, yeah. And, I'm looking at some obesity maps here, and I will say, like, there are certain groups of people who are afflicted by this much greater.
Oh, yeah?
It's your Hispanics, blacks, natives.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's like you think, and
who's the groups that are, here's the best way to phrase it.
Yeah.
Culturally, which cultures are the most recent in history to experience, mass produced foods? And that's minorities.
Right.
And, like a lot of that you can say, like you can see is like predominantly like got to do with like the way the genetically processing alcohol, genetically processing dairy. Right. And so it is one of those things of just like sugar is a big one too. Like the way like just different, ethnicities process sugar is very dependent on like, your cultural background.
For sure. And then your cultural approach to it. And then also the question would be what group gets a lot of promises from one side about having a better life?
Yep.
You know who's doing good though, real quick?
Who?
The Asians. If you're wondering, the Asians are doing good.
Well, I think it's because they know what I think it's because like culturally it's like just very widely accepted that like you just don't have a lot of Asians who try to have a lot of dairy. Right. Like, and because dairy is like one of the hardest things for like ethnically Asian, cultures to process. And they just are like, they just culturally don't care about it. But they have had alcohol a lot longer than a lot of other ethnicities have. And so like they are definitely way more used to processing alcohol more than a lot of like Native Americans and stuff like that. Actually, it's very cool. I encourage everyone to look it up, watch a video or something along on the history of alcohol and where it emerged in different civilizations. It's really weird that like alcohol came around in the Asians who crossed the Bering Straits into Alaska during the Ice Age didn't bring it with them. Or it just didn't make it there. You know what I mean? And it's one of those things of like the Native Americans went for like after the Bering Strait separated and thawed out, there was no alcohol and they got segregated away from people having like fermenting beer culturally. So I'm just like, that's crazy to me. Yeah. Like, don't you think those guys are like, man, maybe we should go back? Right. They got beer. Like maybe we should turn around. Anyways, I just think that's funny, but you should watch how the history of alcohol is a really fascinating thing. All right, back to this though.
And 50% of our children, 120 years ago, when somebody was obese, they were sent to the circus. There were case reports done about them. Obesity was almost unknown. In Japan, childhood obesity rate is 3% compared to 50% here. Half of Americans have pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes. When my uncle was president and I was a boy, juvenile diabetes was effectively non-existent. A typical pediatrician would see one case of diabetes during his entire career, a 40 or 50-year career. Today, 1 out of every 3 kids who walks through his office door is diabetic or pre-diabetic, and the mitochondrial disorder.
That's a lot.
I remember it was a big deal. I had a buddy who, in high school, got diagnosed with diabetes. And we were like, damn, like that's a huge life change. Yeah. He was the only person I knew who got diagnosed diabetic while we were like still in school. There was like a couple of little kids I knew who were diabetic, but they had been born that way. He was the only kid I knew who developed diabetes. And it was like, 1 in 3, dude? That's unreal. That's diabetic or pre-diabetic? Yeah.
My boys are getting their cookies taken away.
Bro, dude, we're going to be... Here's the thing that's crazy to me. He's going to mention it about Ozempic. But like, the way it seems like they're freaking just pre-gaming our kids to become lifetime dependent on Ozempic is unreal. Like, it's just... That's going to become the way people lose weight rather than just working out.
cause diabetes, also causing Alzheimer's, which is now classified as diabetes. And it's costing this country more than our military budget every year. There's been an explosion of neurological illnesses that I never saw as a kid: ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, Tourette's syndrome, narcolepsy, ASD, Asperger's, autism. In the year 2000, the autism rate was 1 in 1,500. Now autism rates in kids are 1 in 36, according to CDC nationally. Nobody's...
Damn, actually, I didn't know this. Just looked it up on that one. Alzheimer's is also sometimes called type 3 diabetes because of the similarities between the two conditions.
Wow.
And Alzheimer's relation to neurofibrillary tangles, working memory networks, amyloid, and how that's related to insulin resistance in the brain. That's unreal. That's crazy. Yeah, maybe that's, I've heard like people have sometimes treat like Alzheimer's and other brain conditions like that via like insulin pumps, but like sometimes it's not just insulin. Sometimes it's a mixture of another cocktail that kind of helps with it. But that's bonkers.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
He's talking about this. 1 in every 22 kids in California has autism. And this is a crisis that 77% of our kids are too disabled to serve in the United States military. What is happening to our country? And why isn't this in the headlines every single day? There's nobody else in the world that is experiencing this. This is only happening in America. About 18%, and by the way, you know, there has been no change in diagnosis, which the industry sometimes like to say. There has been no change in screening. This is a change in incidence. In my generation, 70-year-old men, the autism rates are about 1 in 10,000. In my kids' generation, 1 in 34.
Which is, so this is the response I hear, and I think there's credit to it, right? Because like a lot of people are like, well, the screening has gotten better, so that's why there's more. It's like screening's gotten better, but you look at other generations where we can screen them today, like our parents, our grandparents,
right? Yeah,
there's not more autism there waiting to be diagnosed,
right?
Like sometimes, like don't get me wrong, but it's such a small percentage. And the fact that he's like, you know, you can look these numbers up, like look at 60, 70-year-old men, the amount of them that are autistic is like 1 in 10,000.
Right. Instead of 1 in 22?
1 in 22 for current children in California.
Sheesh. That makes you scared to have kids.
Something is killing the kids, bro. Something is poisoning the kids. And it's like, in my opinion, probably food, right? It's probably the food that you're giving them.
The autism rates are about 1 in 10,000. In my kids' generation, 1 in 34. I'll repeat, in California, 1 in 22. Why are we letting this happen? Why are we allowing this to happen to our children? These are the most precious assets that we have in this country. How can we let this happen to them? About 18% of American teens now have fatty liver disease. That's like 1 out of every 5. That disease, when I was a kid, only affected late-stage alcoholics who were elderly. Cancer rates are skyrocketing in the young and the old. Young adult cancers are...
What's that thing they do to geese?
Foie gras.
Yeah,
they foie gras their livers.
Yeah,
one of my roommates.
What was it? 1 in 18 kids now are foie gras.
Yeah, and the way you foie gras is you take a goose and you force feed it batter and fatty foods.
Dude, yeah. Oh man, you know what? I just had onion rings and I feel gross about it.
I know.
I'm gonna try to not eat fried food anymore, bro. This is literally like this speech alone is more effective than anything else I've ever heard.
I don't know.
Let's eat healthier.
I need some salmon.
Let's hold each other accountable. Yeah. Well, it's okay. We can eat red meat and all that.
Well, yeah, but just like, I need some extra counteractive.
Let's eat green apples and broccoli.
All right.
I feel like that will clean us out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Broccoli's got all them like, it's a brush. It's a brush. A brush is everything out.
I need a colon brush. Get it cleaned out, dude. Whatever. Gosh.
Let's clean it out, bro. Let's be better. He's crazy. He's like, you and I are actually like, I think
too far gone.
No.
like it's
but like look at us. Like look at us and like where we're at. Like I'm approaching 30. I'm not yet. You, old man, already mid-30s. And like look at all of our friends around us that are at this age group. And like I think more often than not, we see friends who have gained unhealthy weight quite a bit. At this point of age. Some people have done reverse and actually gotten leaner or healthier, right? A good amount I think have remained healthy. I do think if we think about like where we're at now versus like when we were in high school and kids and stuff like that, I would probably say like we're looking at like a 20 to 25% of our generation right now in our age range is probably like actually obese. You know what I mean? But I think like it's not too late for us, man.
Yeah.
Like we can clean it up. We can continue to take care of ourselves and you know.
And I took my Zen out while he was talking.
Dude, I think Zen's okay.
I know it was because it's sweet and he keeps saying diabetes and I have something sugary in my mouth and it was getting me.
It's fake sugar.
I know, but still I had to just, you know.
Yeah, it gets you.
Out of every 5. That disease, of American teens now have fatty liver disease. That's like 1 out of every 5. That disease, when I was a kid, only affected late-stage alcoholics who were elderly. Cancer rates are skyrocketing in the young and the old. Young adult cancers are up 79%. 1 in 4 American women is on antidepressant medication. 40% of teens have a mental health diagnosis. And 15% of high schoolers are on Adderall, and 500,000 children on SSRIs. So what's causing this suffering? I'll name 2 culprits. First, and the worst, is ultra-processed food. About 70% of American children's diet is ultra-processed. That means industrial manufactured in a factory. These foods consist primarily of processed sugar, ultra-processed grains, and seed oils. Laboratory scientists who many of them formerly worked for the cigarette industry, which purchased all the big food companies in the 1970s and 80s, deployed thousands of scientists to figure out new chemicals to make the food more addictive. And these ingredients didn't exist 100 years ago. Humans aren't biologically adapted to eat them. Hundreds of these chemicals are now banned in Europe, but ubiquitous in American processed foods. The second culprit is toxic chemicals in our food, in our medicine, in our environment. Pesticides, food additives, pharmaceutical drugs, and toxic waste permeate every cell of our bodies. This assault on our children's cells and hormones is unrelenting. To name just one problem, many of these chemicals increase estrogen. Because young children are ingesting so many of these hormone disruptors, America's puberty rate is now occurring at age 10 to 13, which is 6 years earlier than girls were reaching puberty in 1900. Our country.
That is unreal. Like that is not something you can blame on the screening.
Right.
That is unreal. 6 years difference. I don't just like, I'm trying to mentally process that. You know what I mean? And it's like, you think about it and you're like, well, what's the real results about that? And it's like, I mean, that's your body aging and transforming earlier. You're going to have earlier onset of disease.
Right.
That should be delayed by, decades. Ah, dude, can you imagine puberty at 10? No. That's whack.
Yeah.
That's whack. I don't know. I think it really started hitting at like 12, 13.
I think I'm still going through it.
Oh yeah, you're still going through it. Yeah, yeah, that's true. Me too.
Country has the earliest puberty rate.
I don't have any hair on my chest yet.
I know that's what I blame my lack of facial hair on. On these sorts of the foods.
Yeah, it's the foods that kept you from growing a beard.
It had to have been the foods.
Of any continent on the earth. And no, this isn't because of better nutrition. This is not normal. Breast cancer is also estrogen driven, and it now strikes 1 in 8 women. We are mass poisoning all of our children and our adults. Considering the grievous human cause of this tragic epidemic of chronic disease, it seems almost crass to mention the damage it does to our economy. But I'll say, it is crippling the nation's finances. When my uncle was president, our country spent $0 on chronic disease. Today, government healthcare spending is almost all for chronic disease. Wow. And it's double the military budget. And it is the fastest growing budget item in the federal budget.
Double the military budget. I can tell you right now, military budget is $700 billion US.
Yep.
Wow. Chronic disease for the healthcare industry from the federal government is 1.4 trillion.
Well, there's our debt. Like, I mean, we're way
it's
more
our
debt,
obesity.
But I mean, like that, things like that.
Holy dude! I didn't catch that first time watching this.
Chronic disease costs more to the economy as a whole. Costs at least $4 trillion, 5 times our military budget, and that's a 20% drag on everything we do and everything we aspire to. Poor and minority communities suffer disproportionately. People who worry about DEI or about bigotry of any kind. This dwarfs anything. We are poisoning the poor. We are systematically poisoning minorities across this country. Industry lobbyists have made sure that most of the food stamp lunch program, about 70% of food stamps and about 70 or 77% of school lunches are processed foods. There's no vegetables. There's nothing that you would want to eat. We are.
Right, there's nothing I wanted to eat in school lunches. What? 10 years ago? Yeah. 15 years ago?
Yeah.
Poor citizens, and that's why they have the highest chronic disease burden of any demographic in our country, and the highest in the world. The same food industry lobbied to make sure that nearly all agricultural subsidies go to commodity crops that are the feedstock of processed food industry. These policies are destroying small farms, and they're destroying our soils. We give about, I think, 8 times as much in subsidies to tobacco than we do to fruits and vegetables. It makes no sense. We want a healthy country. The good news is that we can change all this. We can change it very, very quickly. America can get healthy again. To do that, we need to do 3 things. First, we need to root out the corruption in our health agencies. Second, we need to change incentives in our healthcare system. And third, we need to inspire Americans to get healthy again. 80% of NIH grants go to people who have conflicts of interest. These are the people, virtually everybody who sits in a Joe Biden just appointed a new panel to NIH to decide the food recommendations. And they're all people who are from the industry. They're all people who are from the processed food companies. They're deciding what Americans, here is healthy, and the recommendations on the food pyramid, and and what goes to our school lunch programs, what go to the program.
That's crazy.
The Swiss program, the food stamp programs. They're all corrupted and conflicted individuals. These agencies, the FDA, USDA, and CDC, all of them are controlled by giant for-profit corporations. 75% of the FDA's funding doesn't come from taxpayer, it comes from pharma. And pharma executives and consultants and lobbyists cycle in and out of these agencies. With President Trump's backing, I'm going to change that. We're going to staff these agencies with honest scientists and doctors who are free from industry funding. We're going to make sure the decisions of consumers, doctors, and patients are informed by unbiased science. A sick child is the best thing for the pharmaceutical industry. When American children or adults get sick with a chronic condition, they're put on medication for their entire life. Imagine what will happen when Medicare starts paying for Ozempic, which costs $1,500 a month, and is being recommended for children as young as 6, all for a condition, obesity, that is completely preventable and barely even existed 100 years ago. And 74% of Americans are obese.
Oh, my kids will never be on Ozempic.
They'll be on that
Making that
treadmill.
commitment today.
Yeah, treadmill and celery. Let's go.
Like, I'm not here to shame anyone. Like, I don't believe in shaming people for obesity. Just like I don't believe in shaming people for any other lifestyle I disagree with, right? Or any other disease they may have. But I do believe in pushing people to be better. You know what I mean? And I do believe being hey man, you're dying. Your weight is killing you. And there's a way to change that. And I would never shame my children for being overweight. I've never played that mental wits game of guilting them to go work out. But I would be hey, this is what we're doing. We are going to go work out. And I'm bringing you with me, son.
And you can be this is
daughter,
what's for
sweetie.
This is what's for dinner.
Yeah, this is what we're eating. And it's
right.
healthier. And guess what? You're not eating that stuff at school that they provide. We're going to pack you lunch.
God, I love Cane's.
Yeah.
I have to give it up.
Dude, it's crazy when you think about it and you think I don't know. Here's my thing. Maybe this is the way it's been always for all of history. But I'm just thinking I've always thought for myself, I don't give 2 shits. You're only on this earth once. You know what I mean? And is it really going to be fried chicken that kills me? Maybe. But I don't care. That's a decent way to go compared to a lot of the other places. But now I'm thinking about how that stuff would poison my kids. Or how it might mess with my sperm and then give me very disfigured children.
Yeah.
And I'm just if I saw that, I was man, I could have prevented that by not eating so much ranch dressing. So now I'm just my mentality's shifted. I don't even got kiddos.
Yep.
God bless you. You got 3 healthy babies.
Yeah. We got it. They're going to have to write less frozen pizzas.
Yeah. What are you going to say to your little boys, little Pat Juniors, when they wanted Skittles.
You should see them at Chick-fil-A. The amount of sauces they request. They want all of them.
All the sauces.
So do I.
All the rainbows. Yeah, they're so good.
But, yep, it makes you think about it for sure.
Good Lord.
The cost, if all of them took their Ozempic prescription, is $3 trillion a year. This is a drug that is made by Novo Nordisk. The biggest company in Europe is a Danish company, and the Danish government does not recommend it. It recommends change in diet to treat obesity and exercise. And in our country, the recommendation now is for Ozempic
We make it for the Americans,
Yeah.
not for the Danish.
Yep.
to children at age 6. Novo Nordisk, the biggest company in Europe, and virtually its entire value is based upon its projections of what it's going to sell, of the Ozempic it's going to sell to America. And we have the food lobbyists have a bill in front of Congress today that is backed by the White House, backed by Vice President Harris and President Biden to allow this to happen. This $3 trillion cost that is going to bankrupt our country. For a fraction of that amount, we could buy organic food for every American family, 3 meals a day, and eliminate diabetes altogether. We're going to bring healthy food back to school lunches. We're going to stop subsidizing the worst foods with our agricultural subsidies. We're going to get toxic chemicals out of our food. We're going to reform the entire food system. And for that, we need new leadership in Washington. Because unfortunately, both the Democrats and the Republican parties are in cahoots with the big food producers, Big Pharma and Big Ag, which are among the DNC's major donors. Vice President Harris has expressed no interest in addressing this issue. 4 more years of Democratic rule will complete the consolidation of corporate and neocon power, and our children will be the ones who suffer most. I got involved with chronic disease 20 years ago, not because I chose to or wanted to. It was essentially thrust upon me. It was an issue that should have been central to the environmental movement. I was a central leader at that time, but it was widely ignored by all the institutions, including the NGOs, who should have been protecting our kids against toxins. It was an orphan issue, and I had a weakness for orphans. I watched generations of children get sicker and sicker. I had 11 siblings, and I had 7 kids myself. I was conscious of what was happening in their classrooms and to their friends, and I watched these sick kids, these damaged kids. In that generation, almost all of them are damaged. And nobody in power seemed to care or to even notice. For 19 years, I prayed every morning that God would put me in a position to end this calamity. The chronic disease crisis was one of the primary reasons for my running for president, along with ending censorship in the Ukraine war. It's the reason I've made the heart-wrenching decision to suspend my campaign and to support President Trump. This decision is agonizing for me because of the difficulties it causes my wife and my children and my friends. But I have the certainty that this is what I've meant to do. And that certainty gives me internal peace, even in storms. If I'm given the chance to fix the chronic disease crisis and reform our food production, I promise that within 2 years, we will watch chronic disease burden lift dramatically. We will make Americans healthy again. Within 4 years, America will be a healthy country. We will be stronger, more resilient, more optimistic, and happier. I won't fail in doing this. Ultimately, the future, however it happens, is in God's hands and in the hands of the American voters and those of President Trump. If President Trump is elected and honors his word, the vast burden of chronic disease that now demoralizes and bankrupts the country will disappear. This is a spiritual journey for me. I reached my decision through deep prayer, through hard-nosed logic, and I asked myself, what choices must I make to maximize my chances to save America's children and restore national health? I felt that if I refused this opportunity, I would not be able to look myself in the mirror, knowing that I could have saved lives of countless children and reversed this country's chronic disease epidemic. I'm 70 years old. I may have a decade to be effective. I can't imagine that President Harris would allow me or anyone to solve these dire problems. After 8 years of President Harris, any opportunity for me to fix the problem will be out of my reach forever. President Trump has told me that he wants this to be his legacy. I'm choosing to believe that this time he will follow through. His son, his biggest donors, his closest friends, and all support this objective. My joining the Trump campaign will be a difficult sacrifice for my wife and children, but worthwhile if there's even a small chance of saving these kids. Ultimately, the only thing that will save our country and our children is if we choose to love our kids more than we hate each other. That's why I launched my campaign to unify America. My dad and uncle made such an enduring mark on the character of our nation, not so much because of any particular policies that they promoted, but because they were able to inspire profound love for our country and to fortify our sense of ourselves as a national community held together by ideals. They were able to put their love into the intentions and hearts of ordinary Americans and to unify a national populist movement of Americans, blacks and whites, Hispanics, urban and rural Americans. They inspired affection and love and high hopes and a culture of kindness that continue to radiate among Americans from their memory. That's the spirit on which I ran my campaign and that I intend to bring into the campaign of President Trump. Instead of vitriol and polarization, I will appeal to the values that unite us, the goals that we could achieve if only we weren't at each other's throats. The most unifying theme for all Americans is that we all love our children. If we all unite around that issue now, we can finally give them the protection, the health, and the future that they deserve. Thank you all very much.
Boom.
Don't you want a safe environment?
All right, man.
Mm-hmm.
Give me your thoughts.
No, I think that because you can tell he's like part of him is really hard for him to kind of throw in the towel on the race, but another part of him is really difficult for him to side with Trump. But I think that one line he said towards the end there was he arrived to this by deep prayer and hard-nosed logic.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I can get behind that.
Yep.
Like I can get behind that frame of mind.
Oh yeah.
You know, I'm like, sounds good to me. And you know, I don't agree with all of his policies or all those things either, but I do think that to have somebody who is in that frame of mind is so much more valuable than to have, you know, people who are just so self-serving. And I think he has evidence of his record shows like he's not just a self-serving person. Like his record shows that he likes to take on the giants and fight for the little guys and stuff. And, you know, it's funny, like even his sister came out, you know, it was like, I was disgusted that he's like, you know, thrown in with Trump, and my father and uncle would be like rolling in their graves, you know, and all this stuff, you know, it's like, and, anyways, I mean, but I mean, so for him, he's on further division within his family, you know, these sorts of things. And, but I hear a man of conviction too. Yeah. You know, that's kind of stuff I was saying earlier about him too, or just like compared to so many other politicians, it's just like, I don't hear any true conviction from very, very few, elite politicians.
I genuinely think like next to Obama's Osama bin Laden speech,
mm-hmm.
that's the best speech I've heard a president give.
Mm-hmm.
Not a president, but like a politician give
mm-hmm.
in my lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm trying to think of other speeches I've heard politicians give that like stuck with me, and I can't think of one.
Mm-mm.
That was like an excellent speech.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, the line that stuck with me is like, if we can love our children more
mm-hmm.
than we hate each other,
mm-hmm.
like we can save this country.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I'm like, damn, yeah, that's true. But like, the truth is, man, like, let's take a sample of 100 people
mm-hmm.
on the conservative side, the independent side, and the Democrat side or the liberal side.
Mm-hmm.
How many people out of the 100 conservatives or 100 independents do you think are going to be like, I don't give two shits about kids?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I detest children.
Yeah.
Maybe I would say single digits in both.
Right.
Right. I think the majority of them are like, yeah, I mean, I don't want kids for myself. I just don't think it's the cars, but like the children are our future.
Mm-hmm.
Bro, how many do you think on the liberals, if you sampled 100, how many of them would be like, I don't give two shits about kids? Who gives a, you shouldn't even be having kids right now.
Mm-hmm.
It like, not in this awful world we live in, you know, it's just like, you know what I mean? I'm just, it like, I'm mentally trying to think like, yeah, I could see how someone who's a classical Democrat, a classic liberal who does have a bleeding heart for the future of the world, mm-hmm. which is children
mm-hmm.
and children's health and children's safety
mm-hmm.
and children being free of war and
mm-hmm.
having the peace to grow up and become adults.
Mm-hmm.
Like I could see how that person feels left behind by the liberal, like current liberal parties.
Because what I see modeled is a lot of really, really self-selfish,
poison kids,
inwardly looking people, and
mutilate kids, abort kids.
I actually walked by a lady who had a tattoo on her arm, and it just was a heart, and it just said but the heart was kind of turned into a medical instrument, and it just said abortion. And I was like, I that should be a little far for a lot of people, dude. But it's kind of not.
Worship it, dude. Worship the child sacrifice,
the celebration of it. And so it's like
it's crazy because like I can really put myself in the shoes of someone who is pro-abortion, right? I can I've actually gone from the arguments of being like, before I was a Christian, like being like, yeah, abortion makes sense. Why wouldn't it? Like, it's their right. To being like, okay, well, there's, exceptional cases, I think, and like, but like, yeah, for anyone who's raped and any kind of incest stuff or anything like that, yeah, abort them all. Because that's well, if they're going to be born mentally disabled, retarded, Downs, whatever, yeah, might as well abort them. To like, actually, I don't like, and I went through the whole course, the whole journey of like speaking to children who, I remember speaking to someone who was like a child of rape. I remember speaking to someone who was a child of incest. I remember, sitting with a panel of Downs kids, not kids, they were all adults at the time. And all of them be like anti-abortion, be like, I don't like, why would my life be any less just because of the circumstances of which, I was born into this world. Right. And I was just like, holy like, I remember it rocked me. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess like morally and like where I land and all that. And like for the right of individuals and all that, like, I think I'm never pro it. Like, I can't think of a circumstance where I am pro it unless it's like, oh, the fetus is dead and it could like injure
like safety of the mother
stuff. Yeah. And so all that said, like,
I don't see them as a party that values the family.
No, but
or children, right?
Yeah, and I guess I could say like I can put myself in the shoes of someone who's like, it's a necessary evil to preserve, the health and liberty of, women. But like we shouldn't ever celebrate it because it's a tragedy. It's an awful thing for anyone to have to go through. But now it's like it is celebrated, dude. Like people worship abortion. People worship like that as like their pundit that they stand on, and I'm just like, I can't get my brain there. I can't get my brain into that place. Yeah, and it is crazy. Like, I really don't think you're gonna find a lot of people who are pro the sterilization and mutilation of, children under the age of consent, right? To literally. I think the idea, like when you put it into also like medical terms, like a double mastectomy on a 13-year-old girl, what the hell? Like in what world does that make sense? Like if she's too young to properly develop breast cancer, then we know it's not cancer, right? So it's just literally like an ideological choice. Right. And that is unreal to me that like there's like people who are like, that's what they stand on. Yeah. And so when he's talking about this, like if we can love our children and come together more than we hate each other, I'm like, dude, I'm ready. And I find myself as more of like the independent side. Like I've never tried to really like identify with any party because I've fluctuated based on how extreme one party is or the other over the years, right? Or what I've learned about things. But like, if we're going off of spiritual, guidance, prayer as believers, right? I know not everyone does that, but also like logical thinking then. And the mindset of like children are the future and we need to come together and set aside differences for better health and opportunity for them. They're just one group that isn't willing to join. You know what I mean? Yeah. And like, so it makes sense that now he's aligning with the conservative party. Cause it's like, hey, we all can agree on that. Right. Right.
And some of those, like I was saying, there were some of those bigger issues or bigger even like principles. Yeah. Just the principles of the matter. For sure. Yeah. What are you, I think any final thoughts you have about, this whole deal?
I mean, yeah, I was already, we talked about it a couple weeks ago and then again, just a week ago, but I think I'm going to vote for him still because like you said, he's not suspending his campaign in non-battleground states. Like you can still get to make your vote heard and be a choice in those states that aren't battleground states. But he is, endorsing Trump and the Conservative Party to try to make sure that he can win because he knows the DNC's not going to do anything different. And what's weird is like after he did this, there's like Chris Cuomo went to the DNC and bro, he's like just doing like renegade reporting at the DNC. Like Chris Cuomo, who was like mouthpiece for CNN, he's just at like the DNC and he's like, they're telling you that they're standing up for the free person. Look at the boxes around here. And he's like pointing out all the box seats in the stadium. He's like, those are $500,000, $700,000 boxes with hotel suites. And those are the donors, those who were there appeasing. And he's just like, they don't care about the little man, but they're sitting here all week talking about it and how Trump doesn't look like how Trump's going to squish him. And I'm like, dude, Chris Cuomo's out of his mind. Dude, like he's like at the DNC on the floor just doing this.
I love the shift I've seen in that guy from, just like the, from the, whatever, because was he CNN or whatever?
He was CNN with COVID.
Yeah, but with COVID, I mean, he was all
defense of COVID and Fauci.
Of it all. And,
dude, Don Lemon's doing like absolute like balls to the wall, like renegade street interviews. Like Don Lemon's just running around, looks like he's coked out, and he's just like, "What do you think is going on with like the current? What's your faith in the Democratic convention?" And like people are like, "Oh, is Don Lemon on the street?" But I'm all for it, bro, because he's kind of savage right now. I think he's kind of like they cut me off, man.
Yeah,
they cut me off, and I just got to like make a living here now.
Yeah, and even though he's still very extreme too, but it's just like these guys are kind of like they're just going for it.
They're biting the hand because it's no longer feeding. And they're like exposing it for what it is.
For sure. Oh man.
Yeah, I think at the end of it, my biggest thoughts are that is like I hear him when he says he has at least a decade left to be effective. I'm like, dude, I would love to see him utilized to be effective. I'm also afraid because of the way he's talking that he's going to get clapped.
He's kind of
saying the same things.
Family history with these sorts of things.
They got a family history of being well-educated, logical people who speak to the point and expose what the real issue is. And then people are like, okay, shut him up. So,
and I think the assassination attempt on Trump really kind of shook him a little too. Like
probably did,
because on a personal level, of this, like, kind of seeing, just like, and regardless,
he probably was like, it's going to be me, man. I'm going to get shot. And then he's like, damn, it wasn't me.
Yeah.
And perspective shift.
And like, kind of probably pissed him off. Like, regardless of, hey,
that's our thing.
Right. Or I mean, like the extent of like, there's been a lot of conversation on, all the way down to, lone wolf actor over to full on blood conspiracy theory stuff. There is, I think back to the principle of the matter thing, I think it struck a chord in him of being like, I've lived through this and I don't like that. That's not the way we do it, and I'm the firsthand experienced of like, this, violence and hatred for political party stuff. And I think one of the most valuable things he brought up was Lincoln's team of rivals.
Yeah, that's such a badass thing.
Because Lincoln,
I wish that should happen more often. I've always was like, I remember learning about that at school, and like the whole like the loser used to be the vice president. And I remember asking, I was like, why don't we do that now? And they're like, well, no one ever had a real answer because they're just teachers. Right. Like they don't really know why. They're just like, because it just doesn't make sense anymore. I'm like, it seems like it'd make a lot of sense.
Yeah, for real. Because I mean, so he took, 3 of his main rivals and put them on his cabinet, which was key to, his success as a leader. And Lincoln's team building ability was a big part of his greatness. And the fact that he put people on there he disagreed with, people that they'd get in a room and I'm sure they'd yell it out about all sorts of stuff, but the strength that comes from that. I'm gonna have to read this book, and I've heard of this book. I think even my dad referred to me to this book. I haven't read it though, but it's I
just saw it too.
Team of Rivals of the Political Genius of Abraham Lincoln by Doris Godwin, and I'm gonna
audible it.
I'm gonna audible
Me
it
too, bro.
Because I gotta.
We both really enjoyed our Rebel Yell.
Oh yeah,
experience. So I think I'm totally down for another historical nonfiction account.
Yeah, definitely, because
I mean that's how if you think about like our nation. You could argue it. I think I'm not going to say this is as broken as it was during the Civil War,
Mm-hmm.
but you could say we're just as divided on a national scale,
Mhm.
possibly. I've heard people say that. I don't think we're there quite with the division, but what do? You have to heal a nation. You have to sew it back together and
Mhm.
heal it. And not only like sew it, but like treat it day in and day out and make sure the sutures are clean.
Scrub out the wounds.
Yeah. And like, you got to probably restitch it,
Mhm.
and you got to pour the alcohol and clean. And so it's just like, to me, like, who healed the nation?
Mhm.
Abraham Lincoln. What other president has done that?
Mhm.
Maybe George Washington, when he, like, helped to deliver the nation,
Right.
but also had to be like, all right, the rest of y'all are here.
Mhm.
We're one place,
Mhm.
like it or not.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And so it's kind of like, who's the next one to do it?
Mhm.
I can't really
Yeah,
say like
yeah.
with full confidence that I think Trump alone can heal the nation.
No.
There's no point, like there's no way. But I do think that he can be the start to who comes after and binds us together. And I do think, like, if Trump as president brings a good, strong cabinet,
Mhm.
I genuinely believe that can be the start to healing the nation. And those cabinet members can go on to be like, hey, this is working,
Yeah.
and like heal it even better.
And he has to humble himself in the way that like Lincoln did.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to be able to bring all that into one room.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll see. I mean, I will say this. If you'd asked me if I thought Trump was capable of humility,
Mm-hmm.
2 months ago, I would have said no. But
Yeah.
dude, after that assassination attempt and seeing him speak at some things post that,
Been a little different.
I've been like, I think that he had a real wake up call.
Mhm.
I think he might be capable of being like, hey, some things I'm out of my depth on.
Mm-hmm.
And I need people, even if I disagree with them on like other things, I need people who are experts at healing this thing.
And that's one thing I heard in an interview with him today, actually, was I was surprised to hear him say it, was he said, like, the first time he was president, he was like, instead of his typical, like, brash, like, I'm the greatest there ever was type of thing, he was like,
So this Sean Ryan interview? Yeah, I was watching that too.
But he
It's
goes
like,
on,
I made mistakes, hired like the wrong generals.
yeah, he's like, I didn't know how to build the team,
Yep.
and I relied on some of the wrong people, and this time I'm like, my team's going to be a lot different, but it was he didn't approach it with his normal, like,
That was the best.
yeah,
But we'll get you to do it better.
exactly.
Yeah.
I was surprised. I was like,
That Sean Ryan interview was pretty good. Like
Mhm.
I enjoyed it because he did a decent job of stopping Trump
Yeah.
to like get him on topic of a question he wanted to ask.
which I was proud of him too. I was like,
Yeah.
good having the balls to, like, I feel like I would just sit there and let him just run all over me,
Yeah.
never answer a question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wait, what are we talking about? Yeah.
But he kept him on track.
Yeah. Well, I hope, Ken, that you enjoyed this. I hope you really enjoyed RFK's speech. I hope that you have plenty to think and chew over. Ask yourself, do you love the future of our people and the people of the world, which is their children, more than you hate the other person across the aisle? Hopefully you don't hate them at all. Hopefully you just disagree. But I would encourage you to be asking that and think about it as you come to electing here soon, just because I really do think that's the only way we can move forward and heal as a country and help kind of, stop the conflicts that we're involved in across the world. So all that said, Pat, any last sign off?
Till next time. Thanks for tuning in. If you love this episode, drop us a review. If you have qualms or comments, leave us a voicemail on our website. While you're there, check out our latest news, merch, and deals from our sponsors. Till next time, Ken.